Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. I think you will share with me the observation that what we've heard consistently through this last day and a half is that innovation isn't a matter of technical change, it's not a matter of new software, it's not a matter of new mechanics, it's a matter of culture. And we're honored today to have Dr. Jeff DeGraff from the University of Michigan with us here. And he has earned the title of Dean of Innovation, and he advises several Fortune 500 companies on exactly what we're trying to do for our United States Air Force, and that's transform the culture. So without further ado, Dr. DeGraff.
Well, gosh, I'm kind of towards the end of the program here, so I think this is at the end of the party where we get sober, right? This is the sobering. So I'm going to start with myself here. My name is Jeff, and I'm a recovering technologist, and I've been recovering for the past 35 years, and admitting it is the first step to getting better. Now, what cracks me up is whenever somebody wants to talk to me about innovation, what they really want to talk about is gadgets. They want to talk about gadgets. And I've been at this for about 35 years since I earned my doctorate. And I've been in literally over half the Fortune 500 companies. So I've had a real front row seat at the most executive level for a lot of the kind of technologies that happen. But here's the point. Technologies happen all the time, and there's a new technology around the corner. You know, if you're on version 4, there's a version 5, and there's something that's going to disrupt all of that. That's going to happen inevitably. But what I want to talk about today is going to be very radical compared to some of the other stuff we've talked about, which is that's not the real game. In fact, I want to start with a story. In 1990, I got a call from Life magazine. Anybody old enough to remember magazines? Remember Life magazine? And they were doing a story on the 100 most important people of the 20th century. And this woman called me, this reporter called me, and she wanted to talk about a man named Robert Fair DeGraff. And she was incredibly disappointed. I had no idea who this guy was. He had the exact same name as me. In fact, he's a relative of mine, a relatively close relative. Well, it turned out after she got done humiliating me on the call, I started looking into this guy. And Robert Fair DeGraff made the list of the most important people of the 20th century, the 100 most important people, because he invented paperback books. And when I started reading about Robert Fair DeGraff, he invented paperback books, which was a new technology in the 1930s, because he believed it would get rid of illiteracy. He thought the technology would eliminate illiteracy. And what struck me was I was working on a project with Steve Jobs to change the California literacy rates in the California schools by using new technology with the exact same results. It didn't change anything. The new tech did not change anything. The gadget didn't change anything. Because innovation seldom changes culture. In fact, it's the other way around. So I've been associated with a lot of wonderful companies and amazing companies. But one of the things that always cracked me up is when the smartphone came out. One of the things that really surprised the engineers when they started looking at the data, they assumed we were going to take pictures of Yellowstone National Park and, you know, beautiful vistas and wonderful lakes. And what did people really take pictures of? Themselves. So we get the second camera. So culture hijacks technology, and I'm going to prove it to you. And culture is far more important than the gadget is going to create. Now, innovation is really not driven by invention. It's really driven by the ability to see things in a new way. And I've loved the speakers today. We've talked about cognitive warfare and the cognitive map and the cognitive landscape. And that's what we're going to talk about, what we actually know about that in my research over the past 35 years to actually look at what pays in terms of innovation. I want to start with this very simple quote from the crazy-haired philosopher Schopenhauer. Every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world. And that's never been more true than today. Think about all of the crap you see on Facebook. Think about all your social media friends. They believe all the same nonsense you believe. And if they believe something different, what do? You unfriend them. The Spanish Inquisition couldn't have thought of this. On a dark night, on a dark road, people who disagree go away. Schopenhauer, it turns out, was right. Now, I want to give you some examples of culture that I think are very relevant. First of all, the gadget people look at Tesla. We've heard all about Tesla up here. A few things about Tesla. Yeah, Tesla's going to change the world. But does anybody know how many cars they sold last year? They sold 55,000 cars. Anybody know how much money they made last year? They lost $600 million last year. Now, that's going to change, but it's not going to change a lot. Now, the automobile industry is going through a great recession right now. We're having trouble selling cars. What's killing the automobile industry? It's not 55,000 cars. What's killing the automobile industry is Uber. Where is the innovation in Uber, you might say? It's not a gadget. I could tell you, think about it. The app looks like over-the-road trucking in 2007. It's not a well-run company. There's a lot of chaos around it. Where's the innovation in Uber? Simple. Young people will get in the car with a stranger. That's the innovation. Yeah, you were looking the other way. It's kind of funny. Think about, the hotels are being killed by Airbnb. If somebody came to my nice house on the Huron River and used my towel, I'd take it in the backyard, burn it, and bury it, right? I'd sick the dogs on them. So the notion is this is a social form of innovation. Don't believe me? The #1 selling book for nonfiction in 2014 was a book called Flash Boys. It's written by Michael Lewis, and it was about spread networks and how Goldman Sachs and Credit Suisse and everybody else has got this black box network that trades a little faster than you, so they get the stock run up and they get the stock run down. They're a bookie. Doesn't matter whether Ohio State or Michigan wins, the bookie always makes money. And everyone said the fix is in, the man is going to win. But what happened was cryptocurrencies were emerging, and I started writing about these in 2007, and people thought I was insane. Cryptocurrencies, not the same kind of technology, not the advanced sort of stuff. So everybody talks about this like in a really advanced way. It's nothing compared to spread networks. The technology is not nearly as sophisticated. Anybody know where this stuff started? It started in money laundering for drug dealers. Anybody know where streaming technology comes from? The porn industry. Emojis, terrorist cells. Innovation doesn't start with who's the biggest badass on the block. Think about it this way, right? Who's from a blue-collar neighborhood like I am? A working-class neighborhood. Who throws the first punch in a bar fight? The big guy with a Budweiser jacket or the little guy with crazy eyes? Why does the little guy throw the first punch? Because if they don't throw the first punch, there'll be no second punch. Now, this is funny, isn't it? It's what we call first mover advantage. Until you start seeing how people use technology. Anybody like that Amazon A9 engine that recommends things? If you like this, you might like that. Anybody see the problem before December? If you buy fertilizer, you might like black powder and ball bearings. Yeah. Anybody see what's gone with the 13 indictments last week on Facebook? Yeah. This is culture. It's not technology. It's how you're using the culture. Because innovation, we have this dominant logic mindset. And a dominant logic mindset, if you talk to anybody these days about politics or religion, you'll see what it is. Anybody ever talked to you about religion lately? Have they ever changed your mind? No. Can they see anything beyond what their beliefs are? No. And that's the problem. Well, we're going to change that today. We're going to look beyond that. I want to talk about the basic dilemma that all of you have and that the Air Force has right now in a great abundance. Organizations, like people, have to do two things. One, we have to maintain. We have to eliminate deviance. We've got to do things away so we can all do things together. We're all aligned. We're all in this together. And we do this by creating process and standardization. We eliminate variance. We get rid of the weirdos. But the second thing we have to do is grow. And when we grow, growth, innovation, is a form, wait for it, of deviance. And deviance is created by what kind of people? Deviants, yeah. Yeah, look at somebody going, I'm a deviant. Yeah, we know. All right, now, the point is, think about your personal life. The more chevrons you get, the more advanced I've gotten in life. I'm a full professor at a top 20 school. The more chevrons you get, the more optimized your life becomes. And the more you get rid of deviance in your life. So what happens is at the very moment that you need to do something radically new, you don't have the culture or the competency to do it. It happens personally, and it happens to large, effective organizations, and I'm going to make this case as we go on. So what do we mean by innovation? Well, it's pretty simple. A number of years ago, in the early 1990s, I got to write the definition for innovation for the federal government. Innovation, I lifted it from a Marshall McLuhan book that was written in the 1960s. McLuhan said innovations have 4 attributes. Number 1, they enhance something. One of my students, Larry Page, created this little company called Google, right? And what Google did was it took search engines, remember all the drops and pushes and pops of search engines, and it just made a little box, right? And I knew it would work when I was in a Starbucks one day and the 2 gals in front of me said, oh, I met a new boy last night. And the other gal said, did you Google him? And I said, oh my God, this is going to work, right? It's got a real application. It has to eliminate something, and innovation has to kill something. What if the innovation in the Air Force isn't about starting something new? What if it's about stopping something old? Think about what Schwab did and E-Trade did to all those big trading houses. It basically got rid of the broker, right? And those trading houses, E.F. Hutton, they're now completely quiet. It returns us to something. We don't want to be the Jetsons. We want to live like hobbits. Right? Think about that little blue pill that was developed in my little town of Ann Arbor. And I'm 25 again. Yeah, that's what people want. They want slow food, live on the high street, take a blue pill. And finally, the most important thing McLuhan said, and this is important for you to hear, over time, an innovation becomes the anti-innovation. Let me repeat that to you. Over time, an innovation becomes the anti-innovation. Anybody remember when email was going to set you free? Now you're all meaningless slaves. You're all tools to email. Now, I'm going to add a few things to McLuhan. Number one, innovation is a form of useful novelty. It can occur anywhere. It doesn't have to be a gadget. It can be a solution. Think about Starbucks. It's coffee. The Egyptians had it. It's a 4,000-year-old commodity. But you add a little theater, and all of a sudden you're driving McDonald's to their knees. A breakthrough innovation pays in the future. How much data do you have on the future? I'm on all these futuring groups. I'm on all these think tanks, right? I can tell you one of my favorite ones on the Aspen Institute. We got all the stuff right about the internet and what was going to happen with cell phones. We missed the collapse of the Soviet Union. There is no data on the future, and the number one form of resistance to innovation is excessive data gathering. How many have gone to the meeting about the meeting? How many have seen the report about the report? You're stuck in the planning cycle, right? While you're aiming, other people are running the meaningful experiment. And finally, innovations have a shelf life. They go sour like milk. So I'm in Chicago the other day. I'm giving the keynote speech for the American Medical Association, and I see the line go all the way down the Michigan Avenue. And I'm thinking, oh, boy, this is going to be great. They're all coming to see me. No, they're not. At the end of Michigan Avenue is the Apple Store. And the new Apple iPhone has come out. And what happens to the old iPhone the minute the new iPhone comes out? It's crap. It's total crap. So innovations don't stay innovations for very long. So the notion is there's a lot more to innovation than gadgets. And in fact, in my research since 1993, all indexes that measure gadgets have lost to what's called the growth index on Wall Street all but one time. Meaning, you got this wrong. What pays is not a new gadget. It's what you do with the new gadget. It's the culture that creates the new gadget. So it turns out innovative organizations have very little in common. Think about it. Apple makes nothing except for it makes an operating system that's closed. Google makes everything, and its operating system is open. Innovators often innovate in opposite ways. So the notion is if I'm looking at making a new kind of an aircraft or starting a new fast food restaurant, there's no checklist. Two, money is seldom a barrier to innovation. In fact, the more money you have, the less likely you are to innovate. Competition almost always happens in opposite ways, Google and Apple. And incumbents are almost never the first movers, right? And think about this in terms of who you're trying to defend. You know how to defend the Chinese. You know how to defend the Russians. That's not going to be your challenge. There are thousands of nation states and independent players who are going to act on their own behalf. Those are the people that are hard to look at. And there's a lot of them, aren't there? That's the national challenge right now. I'm going to talk a little bit later about why breakthroughs don't happen in the middle. That's why most of these large companies have gotten rid of their global research centers. Because innovation is now happening in places where the corporate bureaucracy can't get to them. Finally, the one thing we know about innovation is diversity. And we're going to talk about the importance of diversity and how diversity actually works and why diversity leads to success, and it's not for the reason you think it is. So there's two questions every innovator has to ask themselves. The first question is how much, and the second question is how fast. We're going to call this magnitude and horizon or magnitude and speed. It turns out that what most people do is they want radical innovation, so you know what they do? They implement a process. Now let me ask you a question. Let's see if you're good students here. Does process create deviance or eliminate deviance? It eliminates deviance. So by its very definition, what you're doing is becoming an incrementalist. That's why startups end up killing incumbents on a regular basis. And you do it, why? Because the devil you know is always better than the devil you don't. You know how to do process. My goodness, there's a process for everything. Just coming down here, there was like 20 processes, right? Number two, if you want more radical innovation, right? What you've got to do is you've got to hire differently. You got to change the gene pool. So I'm looking here in the New York Times last week, and there's an article here. You think you got problems. It's about the film industry. The title is, "A Magnet for Talent Shakes Up Hollywood." You know what's happened in Hollywood? Hollywood has become kind of hierarchical. And what's happening with films is they're becoming more and more technical. And what are those young people doing? Do they want to work for Paramount? Do they want to work for United Artists? No. They're leaving, and what's happening is now we have several film studios that are in serious trouble because they cannot attract the talent that they're looking for because they lack the culture that these young people want. You can say whatever you want about it, but the notion is if it's a talent game, you got to go get the talent. Finally, breakthrough innovation, changing culture. How long does it take to change a culture? I was talking to a senior intelligence official a little while back, and he said the best thing that ever happened to them is that they thought their agency was way in front of everyone else until they had a little shooting in San Bernardino and they couldn't crack the phone of the largest consumer electronic product in the 21st century. And he said it was a sobering moment when all the culture and all the chest beating and all the, oh, we're so much better than everybody, became clear that they had a culture that was holding them back and they needed to reinvent themselves. And you heard your chief of staff talk about the same kind of idea. So how do we get through this? So you've heard all the negatives. What are the positives? Well, it turns out we start talking about cognitive warfare. There's a lot of research on this and a lot of work on this. And I think one of the greatest examples of this are the Chinese. The Chinese have this idea at the basis of almost all their thinking of the Tao. And the Tao basically says the world is at conflict. The yin and the yang. There are things that push against each other, and those are the things that produce the hybrids of the world. From that, they've created a whole sort of philosophy which is articulated in a book called the I Ching, which was written during the time about 400 years before Plato was alive, right? But it gives everybody sort of a map of what they should be doing. Now, what you know about this book is the book called The Art of War. There's a big issue of whether Sun Tzu is a real person or not, but that's a different issue. But The Art of War is basically an extension. It's a how-to manual from the I Ching. And finally, there's a Lapan, which, of course, if you follow Feng Shui or you try and make your life in a certain way, this is sort of a compass for that. But here's the point. What they're not doing is creating process. They're not creating a bunch of inputs and outputs. They're creating a mindset that's shared. They're creating a language that's shared so that their fighting force, when they're away, when they're cut off, when they're separate, know how to think through a problem. These are called heuristics. Now, this gets to the heart of my conversation, the heart of my research. It turns out that the reason 30 places on the planet are the most innovative places, they produce the most intellectual property, is because they're the most diverse. And the diversity isn't just the color of your skin. It's your belief system. It's what you want to do in life. It's the temple that you go to. It's the food that you eat. But here's the point. In these places, when you encounter the other and you engage the other in a meaningful way, you have to do one of three things. Either you try and dominate or retreat, you try and compromise, which are common things these days, or you create hybrids. Now, I submit to you that the American way is to create hybrids. We're the most diverse country in the world. Our history of innovation is the history of immigration in the United States, as most of you know. The issue is, where are we encountering the people who don't believe the same crap we believe? Now, I want to talk about this model. Some of you have seen this. If you've been to business school, you know this as the Competing Values Framework by Quinn and Cameron. If you read a lot of popular media, it's called the Innovation Code or the Innovation Genome. I'm the third researcher on this model. Basically, it's a way of looking at three things together. It's a way of looking at what individual leaders do, the type of culture and competency that they're likely to produce, and the outcomes that those competencies and cultures are likely to produce as a result. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how the model works. Just like in anything in life where there's a part of us that's flexible, there's a part of us that's stable. There's a part of us that looks outside and a part of us that looks inside. But there are two key parts of this model that are very different than almost anything else you'll see. And the first is, the first portent of high growth, high innovative companies, high innovative organizations, is the tension between the green quadrant, which we'll talk about, and the red quadrant. The radical versus the incremental. The radical with a lot of risk versus the no risk at all. When these two things show up together with high numbers, it's almost always a predictor that this company is going to outgrow the other companies. This is the question of how much, but it's a conflict question. The second is the question of how fast, and this is the companies that go very, very fast, show short-term performance, get it done, versus the ones that are long-term and developed people. Same thing. When we see these two oppositions together, that's almost always a sign that we're going to outperform the market in terms of innovation. So what this means is I want you to think of yourself like a Russian nesting doll, like a Matryoshka doll. I want you to think of yourself as contained by other dolls, right? There's always a doll on top of your doll. So I'm Jeff, and I think I got all this agency, but on top of me is my wife, Stanny, and the University of Michigan, and the labs that I own, and the people that I'm responsible for. And on top of them is the real world. You know, is there a pandemic? Is there a war? Is there a financial crisis going on? And the notion is innovation is not driven by freedom. It's driven by constraints. What are your constraints? So let's talk about the various colors. How many know a person like this? This is Steve Jobs. I was lucky enough to know Steve Jobs when I was a young man. Steve Jobs situation, we're going to call this person the artist. But this isn't like a Myers-Briggs test. This isn't I'm an ENTP or an INFJ. It's not that. There are situations in which people are more effective or less effective. So the situation, the battle situation, if you will, the cognitive map, if you will, the cognitive warfare, if you will, is in a unique situation. Breakthroughs. I'm making a miracle drug. Visual prosthetics. Highly differentiated. You know, some of you out there drinking IPA beers. I saw you last night. You know, your craft beers. Something like haute couture fashion. Something like a battlefront that you haven't seen before. A technology you haven't seen. So what kind of organizations do you use in that kind of a situation? Well, you use organizations called adhocracy, which means you're morphing. Right? You heard General Quast talk about this. You're making it up as you go along. You're adjusting. It's fluid. These are startups because startups can't compete on scope or scale. These are biotech industries because I'm competing against a big pharma for a miracle drug. Right? I'm going to look different when I'm small because I cannot compete on scope or scale. So the artists are very creative. They're all ADD, right? They all pick up every pretty pebble on the beach. They're easily distracted. My favorite story that relates to your industry is the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. If you remember 4 years ago, they discovered the bose, the God particle. Remember this? 7 Nobel Prize winners, 2 Nobel Prize winners, all their chevrons, all their medals, 5 stars, said that they thought if they started it, it would create a black fissure and destroy the universe. Yeah, some of you are shaking your head. You remember this? They bet a beer and pulled the switch. See you in hell, Jürgen. Note, never let the Greens touch the switch. Never let the Greens know the switch. The Greens will drive the Harley into the pool tonight. Don't let the Greens do that. Because the Greens are all about trying things new. So the Greens are all about doing things new. They're all about trying to see the future first. They're all about testing boundaries because what Greens want is they want freedom. Now, the opposite of Greens, those people are maintainers. Those people make sure that the Air Force does things right. You're going to have to deal with the Greens in the green way, which means they're always going to be late to your meetings. They're never going to solve the problem. They think your problem is too small. They're going to make it way bigger. They're going to say that's small picture thinking, and they're going to make it way bigger. If you want to have a meeting with the Greens, don't show them a report. Bring a fifth of Jack Daniels and a box of crayons. You're going to do some coloring, right? These are these guys. Now, the opposite are the control people, predictable. Now, you know, we know they came in here on time, quietly singing hi-ho, right? These are those guys. They love scale. They love to get to scale. They love to talk about scale. I'm at scale. I got big iron. I got big data. I got 200 aircraft. What do you got, right? These are these guys, right? They're very cautious. They don't want to screw anything up. Now, 3 things you'll always find in these kind of organizations, in these kinds of situations. Number 1, failure is not an option. In a lot of your work, failure is not an option. Number 2, it's almost always a complex industry. We had General Electric up here. Think about and Boeing. Think about the new airplanes they're coming up with, like 2 or 3 million moving parts. A lot of complexity. So you got to have these kind of people. And finally, I want you to think about it's almost always a turnover business. Think about McDonald's. You go to McDonald's, order a cheeseburger, and some illiterate person presses a cheeseburger button. And simultaneously, somebody shoots a cow in Argentina. Bang! And everything in between happens. Smithers, come here. These are these guys. All about hierarchy, and hierarchy is important because it creates efficiency and quality. We're going to call this the aft position of innovation. And the engineers are the guys who do this, all about security and productivity, right? They're the opposite of our artists. So when we start looking at engineers, we're going to find people who have expertise, somebody who has all their credentials, their certifications, somebody's got the right history. We're going to find them in the military. We're going to find them in medicine. We're going to find them where there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. And how the artists, how the forward position can engage the aft position, actually read the document. Look at the data for a change. Show up at the meeting on time. Incidentally, those of you who are in that artist category, you show up late and you think the Reds don't notice you. They got a file on you like J. Edgar Hoover. Dark night on a dark road, we'll never hear from you again. So the first thing I'm telling you is find the person who makes you crazy, because that's going to be your key to success. Those of you who are engineers, you need the artist, because the artist sees the future first, because they're looking for it. They're wrong half the time, but at least they're looking for it. And incidentally, artists, you need the engineer because you can't get to scale. You got too many ideas. You're an ideaholic. You should be in a 12-step program for this crap. So when I think of these, I like superheroes. Think of Johnny Storm as kind of the Flame is the ultimate kind of green. And think about Richards as the ultimate kind of red, MIT scientists. But the two of them together kind of help each other, right? You see this a lot. Lennon and McCartney, Page and Serge. These guys come together. And they come together because nobody is an island. We need the other to create the constructive conflict. Now, here's the other one. This is one of the other classic military formations. The athlete. The competitor person. Athletes are great when we get a contentious situation because they're aggressive and demanding. You want to get one of these guys' bloods up? Whenever they're doing something, introduce a competitor. Oh, we're doing great with AI. Oh, here's a benchmark, what the Chinese are doing. Oh, Blues will get their blood up. Oh, we got to fight these guys. Yeah, because now we got somebody else, you're running against somebody else here. They're market-based, which means they're very externally oriented and they're very interested in how they're doing relative to someone else. So if you get top 10, bottom 10 in anything you're doing, you got a blue on your hands. And they're all about vitality and prosperity. They like to get better every day in every way. They love to look at ratings. I'm in first place, you're in second place. I came to college as a wrestler. This is a very boomer kind of a thing. I'm an old boomer. That's how I got to college. And when I went to college, one person got the gold medal, and the rest of you were losers, pathetic losers. You got to shrink or you learn to drink. Right? We went to the moon. We killed, we eliminated the commies. We built the net. You look at your kids and go, get a life. You're meaning, these are boomers. The University of Michigan, like the University of Chicago, we still grade on a curve. And we say things like, don't send your ducks to Eagle School, right? So the notion, yeah, you say it too, I guess. So the notion is they're very goal-oriented. This is the goal-oriented group. This is the group that actually is filled with warriors. These are the people that look at short-term goals. These are the darlings of Wall Street. Now, sages, these are your children. Sages are going to be different. Sages, one of the things that makes the athlete crazy is you're always postponing deadlines. Show up on time. Don't talk about us. Fall on your sword. Right? What we used to say in the old days, man up, or person up, I guess you say these days. The notion is make quick decisions. So let it be written, so let it be done. You ever been in the blue meeting? Right? It's a 5-minute meeting, right? And it's like a drive-by shooting. Bang, bang, bang. PowerPoint slides everywhere because they can't speak in complete sentences yet. Decisions have been made. Things have been deployed, right? Veins popping alarmingly out of their heads, right? They're pit bulls on 2 legs. These are what these guys are. Now, these are your children. And Americans, these are the Chinese. 30-some years back and forth to China. There's 50-some words in Mandarin for which uncle are you? Are you the crazy uncle we avoid? Are you the rich uncle we suck up to? Who are you in the clan? Right? The notion is this is the relationship quadrant. Now, these are your kids, and you laugh about your kids. 3 things about your kids. And you can judge however you want. But these are the people you want. These are the people who are going to write the code, make the technology. This is the next generation. 3 things about your kids that you should know. Number 1, starting in 2014, over half of all births to women under the age of 30 are outside of marriage. Adjusted for their education level, the more educated the woman is, the less likely she is to marry. Young people don't marry. Are you seeing this? Number 2, when we asked the Pew Charitable Trust where people wanted to work, right? Did they want to join the Air Force? Did they want to work for General Electric or Boeing or anywhere else? No. What do they want to do? They want to work for themselves. They want to have meaning and impact. And they want to take a month off to go to Tanzania and cure river blindness. They're good people. They just don't want to work like you do. When you recruit them, you're recruiting them the wrong way. They don't want to do what you want them to do. Maybe a small subset does, but the larger group, the group that's going to keep you in good stead, they don't want to do that. And 3, we ask these people what religion they belong to. The fastest growing religion, people on the age of 30, is no religion at all. Now, here's why I'm telling you this. You can judge this however you want to judge this. And people love to say, well, they'll change. It's like the 60s. No, they won't. You're wrong. And why you're wrong is my generation as boomers used institutions to advance ourselves. We used institutions to heal society's woes. Think about it. I've been married forever. I'm a practicing Roman Catholic. My name is DeGraff, which should tell you I'm a capitalist pig from way back. But our children are not. They are the first de-institutionalized group we've ever seen. They're networked. They're not hierarchical. And the notion is, I think the biggest change we've ever seen has nothing to do with technology. There is a culture shift. And I don't know about you, but I'll tell you my view. I'm no longer on the sunny side of the hill. So you have two choices. You can either engage the sunny side of the hill, or you can eschew it and be judgmental. But I guarantee you the rebound will be odious, right? Because they've got numbers and they've got time. How do you know this? Think about elections. Do you know that there are now 6% more millennials than there are boomers? We're dying off, boomers. They're growing. You want to make a better world? Pay attention. Now, Xers who are in the crowd, right? Where are my Xers? Woo, Xers. You're going to be the most important generation in 100 years because you speak boomer and millennial. You actually are going to be the ambassadors. So our children are highly cooperative. It's all about beliefs and lifestyle. Fair trade coffee. Was the chicken treated nice before we ate it? You know, these guys. Did it have a name? Yeah, it had a name. Sebastian the chicken, right? And they're clan organizations. We've never seen anything like this. They're networks. They're not even real organizations. They're federations. They're groups of people that get together that like have 2 or 3 people, and they're very fluid, and they come in and out, and we laugh at them, but these are the groups that become the big tech companies you guys are talking about. And the reason I know that is I was there. Finally, they're all about capability and community. They're held together by values. They're not held together by goals. They're held together by values. They really believe in values. Now, I want to point something out to the Air Force here. You believe in values too. This is why you do what you do. You're a community service organization. You have great affinity for the values and community you have. You're unrivaled. You're amazing. But so are the young people. They just do it in a different way. You should have kindred spirits here. You should have kindred spirits here. So, the care and feeding, we're going to find these people in the NGOs, and we're going to find them in places where they're managing conflict and where they're connecting with other people, right? The whole cyberspace that you're talking about. We're going to find them in places that are really lifestyle companies, and what they really want is harmony in the workplace. They don't like conflict. They don't want to fight. And the notion is, Blues, here's what you can do. You can be understanding that they want more in life than you want in life. And this is me as a good old boomer talking to you, right? You can understand that these are our children, so we got to be a little more patient. We got to be a little more handling the conflict in a little more decorous way, a little more inclusive, a little less judgmental. So this is the issue of how fast. This is the second thing. So Blues, hard chargers, knuckle draggers, fist fighters. You know who I'm talking to. You know if I'm talking to you. Warriors. Go find yourself a kumbaya person. Go find a person who's a sage, who's the healer, who's a teacher, who's a helper. And don't think these people are weak. I go back to Chinese culture. Oh, don't underestimate that. 4,000, that show's still running on Broadway. 4,000 years. There's nothing else like it on the planet. So the notion is, just because they're different doesn't mean they're weak. Doesn't mean they're wrong, and don't even think about overlooking that. Because one of the things that I've heard in all the talks is you're very concerned about ideas are moving into that community. Yeah, that's what the community does. They search and reapply ideas. That's what this community does. So do your kids. They don't recognize intellectual property. Neither do your kids. Do you see what I'm getting at here? Now, this is Sue Storm and the Thing. The Thing just hits things and tries to crack them, and Sue Storm has great, she's the ability to have force fields and protect people and read your mind and all that kind of good stuff. Actually, I like Sue Storm better. I think she's kind of the modern, she's the next version. Now, how many have been married more than 10 years? Let's see some hands. More than 10 years. Okay. How's that little change going? You can't even find the sock drawer still, right? She's still working on you. She still complains. She goes to Sunday services and complains about you. Now, the point I'm trying to make is every upside has a downside. So the downside of the greens is they're incredibly unrealistic. They're always coming up with crap that's never even possible. The downside with reds is they always think they know the right answer. This is the right answer, soldier, right? The downside of the blues, they always take over. They're aggressive, boorish, and rude. The downside of yellows is they're all the optimistic people. You can do it. And the blues are thinking, no, you can't. You suck. Sit down, right? The point is you can't change the behavior. Anybody who's been married more than 10 years know that. Number one year for divorce is what year? It's year one. People always say year 7. No, it's year 1 by far. What do you learn in year 1? He's not going to change. He's going to keep doing this. Yeah. That's what you're going to learn. Can you, in fact, engage the loyal opposition in this thing? Now, if you really want to know what people are, look at what they do under stress. Look at what they do when they're duressed. Do they talk to all their friends? Well, that's a sage. Do they shorten the field and focus on sort of 4 things? Well, that's an athlete. Do they try and create a whole bunch of data points in a process? Well, that's an engineer. You know, do they fantasize and wiggle out of all kinds of stuff, right? The weaselly greens, yeah, then you're green. Then you're an artist. The same is true for countries. Now, every person in every country has all 4 quadrants. We're sort of learning the alphabet here. But we have tendencies. So we talked about this. American culture. How did we become America? We've been talking about history here. Is American history really nice? Did we come and play nice with everyone? No. There's only 3 reasons you came here. You came here to chase Gold Mountain, you came here to escape the Tsar, or you came here in chains. And then we had lots of combat and pushing and shoving, and it was really nasty. Is that fair? And when I was an advisor of the Federal Reserve Bank, and when the Federal Reserve in 2007 issued a warning and the market collapsed in September 27th of 2007, between September 27th and January 1, we laid off 6 million people. Bang, bang, bang. That's the American way. But we also hired them back faster, didn't we? That's our culture. We're very ballistic. We're very event-driven. But the Chinese are not. The Chinese are very much a clan culture, very much a relationship culture. It's the opposite culture. Japanese culture, of course they can make great cars because they've had Hari design for 3,000 years. Quality has always been part of the ethos of the Japanese culture. My last name is DeGraff, the Dutch. The Dutch have always been innovators. Why? Because we're a piddly-ass country. We're small. We got to go places and do deals because we can't compete on scope or scale. So you're seeing this also in the national ethos. So what is exactly that we need to do? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to assemble a diverse group. How many of you are missing one of these groups here? Because these are essential to create the conflict. If you have no conflict in your group, I guarantee you, you have incremental innovation. You're optimizing. Where's the conflict? And the conflict is not negative. I'm not talking about disrespect. That's not what I'm talking about. We respect people. We talk to people with fond regard. These are our colleagues. These are our life mates. We care about people. But conflict that's constructive. So what I'm telling you is no safe spaces, no trigger words. We have the conversation. It's the American way. But we have it respectfully to get to the next place. How many would like to have that right now in Washington? Wouldn't it be great if the whole healthcare debate, it should be all privatized or it should be all public? Aren't there a million places in the middle of that? Isn't that where innovation resides? Instead of spending another $1 trillion on this, can you imagine what we'd create? But we're not doing that now because we're not engaging the other, because we're not looking for the other. You stay in your social media pods that you've got, you'll never find the other. Your life will be more comfortable, and you will never do anything worth anything when it comes to growing. You're maintaining your life. That's all you're doing. So first, put your Fantastic Four together. Number 2, engage them. Be deeply interested. I love millennials. I love the yellows. They make me crazy. I got these labs. They're filled with yellows. They come in late. They go home early. They're all on their phone when I'm talking, all this crap. But I have to engage them. And I listen to them because they have something I don't have. Because they're going to help do something that I can't do. So the first thing I need you to understand is surround yourself with people who aren't like you. I need you to understand that you have a portfolio life. You can't manage everything the same way. Right? I think about my life. My life is like your life. It's no different. Part of my life, I'm a professor at one of the top research universities in the world. I have to wear a pointy hat. I have to look at how you've done your research. I have to look at, did everything go right? And I have to act really important, like I'm really smart. Part of my life, I got all these consultants, and they fly around the world, and they have to make money. And part of my life, I have doctoral students who are brilliant, and they're all at the top schools now. But they need a lot of time. They want to talk about, Jeff, can you have coffee and get off the road? And they want to talk about, I want to be at Harvard next year, whatever it is. And part of my life, I'm in my lab, and maybe the CIA knows what I'm doing, but it's my Dr. Frankenstein time, right? It's my doing weird crap time. What would happen if I treated my doctoral students like I treat my consultants? They'd be dumb as a bucket of hair. But they're not. They're brilliant because I have to treat them differently. So surround yourself with people that are different than you. The people make you crazy. Do you have a person who makes you crazy that actually is highly effective and gets you to the next place? 2, your portfolio life. But 3, the most important one, how you innovate is what you innovate. How you innovate is what you innovate. It's like having a hammer, a wrench, a screwdriver, and a hammer. They're all effective. You need all of them. You don't use them interchangeably, do you? So what the biggest problem I see is that people say, I want radical innovation. I want that green kind of artist innovation. Say, great. So what we're going to do is change the gene pool, speculate markets, run a lot of experiments, diversify our pipeline. No, I'm going to run a highly optimized process. Everyone's going to be certified in the process. It's going to be 12-step process. Everyone's going to go through the process. It's going to be called the Air Force way. And I'm going to get radical innovation. You know the truth of it, don't you? No, you're not. You're going to get incremental innovation. It's going to be quality and it's going to be effective, and that's virtuous, true, and good. But you are going to accidentally do what? You're going to accidentally strangle your forward position. I want you to think about it for a minute. How come Sears didn't become Amazon? How come McDonald's didn't become Starbucks? How come Microsoft didn't become Google? Because they were too busy trying to do one thing to create the opposite result. It doesn't work that way. Second, you have to create the vision together. That's what conflict does. It makes us find the place where we can get to a new place, not a compromise. Compromise is death. When you engage, you create the new vision. And I think that's what we've heard here today. That's what's exciting to me today. We're trying to create a new Air Force. How does the old Air Force go with the new Air Force? That's what we got to figure out, don't we? We can't get rid of fighters. We got to have fighters. But how does that relate to the new stuff we're doing? How do we sync this up? That's the conversation you need to have. I'm finger wagging at you now. I'm talking to you like you're a Fortune 500 company. That's the conversation you need to have, because that creates the new way, the third way, the hybrid way, the culture and competency that goes with it. Finally, you need to start coming up with solutions. I'm not talking about sitting in a back room and planning and planning and planning. And one of the things that I hear all the time for people who are in technology is, well, Jeff, you know, you can't actually design a plane until you actually design a plane. That's nonsense, right? Think about any miracle drug you've ever seen. Invention happens in steps. It happens in chunks. You certainly can chunk differently, right? You certainly can try things. Things lead to other things. Version 1 leads to version 2. Right? Said, pardon my language, as Hemingway used to say, the first draft is always shit. And in his case, the last draft often was too, right? So how you innovate is what you innovate. Now, I want to give you just a couple thoughts before we get out of here. Number 1, the problem with innovation isn't in any quadrant. It's the handoffs. The handoff between the greens. The problem with greens is greens love new technology, but they're orphans. They don't relate to anything. So I look at the Air Force, and you have an abundance of all kinds of swag tech. My issue is, how does that relate to what you're doing, right? Number 2, the handoff for the greens is difficult because they're in the forward position, they're trying stuff. Number 2, the middling position has 2 problems. We get the athlete and we get the sage, dogs and cats. They don't like to get along, but the second problem is the longest cycle. It's sometimes called the bottom of the bathtub or Death Valley. How many have been on a project that lost its momentum? Yeah, there you go. So the notion is you have to platoon players in and out, and Xers, this is where you come in. You speak both languages. You have to shepherd this project all the way through. The problem with the Reds is the Reds have optimized everything. The Reds have made sure that we've maintained everything, and they don't have a line of sight to what's coming down the pike. So when it does come down the pike, you're so optimized that you can't deal with the deviance. So it's not in the individual quadrants that large organizations fail, it's the handoffs. Now, I want to talk about this rule. I hate the 80-20 rule. I think it's a rule for stupid people. If you start thinking about rules, pay attention to the world. When do people really change? Really? When their life sucks. Why do people change when their life sucks? Why is Apple worth $780 billion today, and it was trading at $2.97 in 1997? Because when you're in a crisis, the risk of trying something radical and the reward of the reward of staying where you're at is reversed. Your life sucks. Go through a divorce, lose money, lose a friend. That's when people change. When they change, when they get that diagnosis from the doctor, not when life is good. The other time people change is when they're on a roll. You got promoted, you won the lottery, you're in love, stud monkey, whatever they call you, right? Same thing, you have what's called risk capital. Innovation doesn't move from the inside out, it moves from the outside in. Innovation is a pincer maneuver. Innovation happens at the horizon. Those of you who are far away in your wing commands from headquarters, you know this. Final thought here. Innovation happens in cycles. These are called Schumpeter cycles. Schumpeter basically said Adam Smith was wrong, and we've had 6 Nobel Prize winners that said Schumpeter was right. Schumpeter says organizations are created by artists, then we get the athletes, then we get the sage, and then finally we get the engineer. And he says at that point, he calls this the point of creative destruction. And Schumpeter says the absolute death knell of an organization is at the very moment that they're doing well, Air Force, every process, every senior person on the capitalization committee, every metric is designed to eliminate variation. We're not killed by the enemy. We kill ourselves. We have seen the enemy and he is us. This point of creative destruction is the seeds of our undoing are sown at the pinnacle of our success. General Motors in 1950 had 53% of the world's car market. Drip, drip, drip. I'll leave you with this thought and one final thought. Stop believing you can see the future. Make smaller, wider bets. Stop choosing big. Go faster. You heard this from all your generals. Stop mistaking your managers for your innovators. Start hiring weirdos. Having more ambition than capability. Build on the capability you got. Starting at the center. No, start at the outside in. Listening to the wrong people. Listening to the people who are going to move first. They're not your rivals. The people who are going to move first are the startups. You're going to be the last people leaving a burning building. And finally, failing to connect the dots. You have to connect the dots. I want to leave you with the DeGraff hypothesis. This is probably what they'll put on my tombstone. Of all the stuff I've written, this is what people remember. The amount of innovation an organization produces is inversely related to the number of stupid PowerPoint slides, ridiculous elaborate process diagrams it makes about innovation. Just do it. I've created a website, and there's some handouts for free stuff. If you want to learn about how to do this, I'm not selling anything. I'm not going to follow up with this. But there are some videos that I use with students. There's some materials there. If you want to do this in your wing command, knock yourself out. Thanks for having me by, and thank you for your service. Good luck.
Dr. DeGraff, many words come to mind, all of them positive, but the one that most comes to mind is brilliant. So by the authority vested in me by no one in particular, I'm proud to pronounce you an airman for life. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it.